Y'all, I apologize. It's 5 after 8. I wasn't watching the watch. Buddy, would you say a prayer for us, please?
Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, we join our hearts in prayer this morning to thank you for your goodness toward us and to ask, Lord, that you would guide us in this meeting to do the things that would be acceptable in your sight. Father, these things we pray in your most holy name, in the name of Jesus Christ, your Son. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, sir. Before we get started, we got several senators that a couple of them never have been to our ag committee meeting. Welcome to y'all. Before we get started, we got a brand new member of the House who is a brand new member of the ag committee. Flip that thing on and tell us a little bit about yourself, Representative Kirby.
All right. Well, thank you. My name's Tom Kirby. I represent District 107 in Walton County, Loganville, and also Grayson area, part of Gwinnett County. Agriculture economics major from the University of Kentucky many years ago. Grew up on the farm raising cattle and crops, and really excited to be here and part of this group. So thank you.
We're glad your first meeting of the House is with the best committee in the House. So welcome to the hustle. We got 3-4 Senate bills that we need to do. If it's okay with Senator Bullock, since you got 2 or 3, I'm gonna go on and let Senator Mullis do his, and yours might have a little discussion, if that's okay. So Senator Mullis, if you'll, that'd be fine. Somebody hand him a mic, because we have to record this stuff in the House side. I don't know how y'all do it in the Senate, but.
House's most distinguished committee, right next to transportation. But I have a little horseshoeing bill where horses get shod. Is that the correct description? And it's a little preemption thing. I've got a guy who has a horseshoeing facility, training facility in my area, and trains people from all over the world. And as you can imagine, a blacksmith is kind of I guess they could be on the endangered list. There are not many of them left. One of those kind of old traditional professions that needs a little help, a little protection. And in good old England, before you can get a horse shoed, you have to have a prescription, which is kind of ran out the horsing business. But in our area, our blacksmith worked very well, in fact, together with the veterinarians. And in fact, the substitute that you have has been brought to us by the veterinarians, and this is the language that they think might be better, and I'm definitely okay with that.
All right, we're working on LC 286241S is what
Yes.
the Senator's talking about.
And I want to thank the Veterinarian Association and also our distinguished veterinarian, Gene Maddox, for their I guess, oversight on this issue to help perfect the bill. So thank you, Gene, and your profession. So I'll be glad to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, let me. I'm sure there will be some. Maybe let me explain something that we got a little confused on yesterday, and we had to add it into your package about 5 minutes ago. The part that is stapled to the substitute is not what we're working off of. There should be some code sections, 3 pages in your folder. Have y'all all got that? And that's where the exemptions of veterinary practice comes in. And that will match up with the language in the substitute a whole lot better than what we got stapled to your substitute. We just got a little bit confused. And it's my fault, not Pat's. So
I've never heard that happen, Mr. Chairman. In the Senate, we always blame Pat and her colleagues.
I'm a little bit smarter than to blame Pat for anything. That's what.
Or you could extend that to some of the senators too. Not us.
But if you look down on the third page of what the 3-page deal on the exemption, that's where the language will fit in a whole lot better. So has anybody got any questions for Senator Mullis? Is there a second? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Jay Neal will handle this in the House. And if I can be of service to anybody in the Senate Transportation Committee, it'd be my pleasure. I will. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Maddox.
You are on rules, aren't you?
Yes, sir, and I look forward to helping you today again.
Thank you, sir. Senator Wilkinson, this is your first trip over on the good side.
Okay.
This is, heck, what bill are you? 357.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is good to be here with you this morning. Excuse me. This bill would repeal the Georgia Treated Timber Act of 1973, and the bill was introduced at the request of the Department of Agriculture. They felt like it was not because of changes in the industry and because of the industry certification. They felt like this act was not needed anymore. I think there's only one other state that currently has this law still on the books, and that's Missouri. I believe last year they collected $1,320 in fees, so they're not doing a lot of these inspections, and when they do the inspections, they're not finding a lot of infractions. So I bring this bill to you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody got any questions? What it really amounts to, Senator, is a whole bunch of language getting stricken out of the code, right?
That's right. Less regulation.
Which is one of them things we need to spend a whole session doing.
Okay.
Move to class, Mr. Chairman.
The second?
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Oh, no. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We'll figure out somebody to carry it. Might be a good first bill for our new guy. Thank you, sir. Senator Bullock, whichever one you want to do first, sir.
I was unprepared to come for any controversy today, and so if you tell me which one's got controversy, we'll let that be the last one.
Do 367.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's always a great opportunity to come before the House Agriculture Committee and welcoming the newest member. And I closed my ears. I didn't hear exactly what college you said you graduated from. But we'll forgive, everybody's entitled to one mistake. But Senate Bill 367, which deals with the Department of Agriculture, and this new language in here, and it's when the department assesses civil penalties on someone for violations, and there are times that those civil penalties aren't paid in full up front, and this would give the commissioner the option and ability that he may require a surety bond for somebody if they've had a civil penalty applied against them for violations, and it's an option that currently he doesn't have. And when the commissioner came in, he found that there was a lot of unpaid civil penalties, and the reason was that they just didn't have a way to force somebody to stay on the word that they'd pay it, and companies would go out of business, and sometimes the civil penalties are what force them. But this would give him that option of being able to require they have to have a surety bond if civil penalties are applied. be glad to try to answer any question.
Does anybody have any questions for Chairman Bullock?
Is this just a one-page bill?
Well, it's got 2 pages.
We ain't got but one. It's on the back. It's a couple of lines. All right. If any, after line 25, line 26, continue said final decision, the commissioner may commence and maintain an action against the principal and surety on the bond. That's pretty important language to the bill. Do we need to make y'all all a copy and let you look at it right quick? I apologize. One more time, I messed up. I should have read all that before. Robert?
I'm just curious, if you're going to require them to pay the fine or pay the penalty, how you can't make them do that, how you going to make them do it? Surety. I mean, what's... I mean, am I making sense?
You're making a lot of sense, and that's a good question, and I don't have an answer for you. I think we've got another speaker that's willing to...
I was going to ask any of that crowd back there if they wanted to say anything.
The surety bond would be put on the suspended portions of the penalties. We typically will issue a civil penalty that's for a certain dollar amount. We'll make them pay a percentage of that, and we'll hold the rest of it over their head as kind of a compliance measure. And as the senator pointed out, oftentimes they'll go out of business or they'll just leave. And we had one this week that owes us $18,000, or owes you guys $18,000. Disappeared. We don't know where he is, can't collect, and that happens fairly often.
On the other hand, tell me if I'm thinking wrong. You find a guy or company $200,000, you bump it down to $10,000. He pays the $10,000, but there's nothing else hanging out there to make him do right the next time. So he can think of the $10,000 as a cost of doing business and keep on doing what he was doing wrong to start with. But if he's got a surety bond of 100 and whatever thousand hanging out there over his head, he knows he's got that, and the bonding company, number one, is going to make him do right. And then the other thing is he's still got that bond hanging out there. Is that another way to think about it too?
Yes, sir, it is, absolutely.
And that's if he stays in business and stays in business in Georgia and doesn't leave. He's still got the bond hanging over him.
Yes, and the process we have now is pretty lacking. We have to go through the Attorney General to get a FIFA. And even when you get a FIFA, you have to renew them every 7 to 10 years. And they're just almost impossible to collect.
Is there more questions?
And would his agreement to a surety bond be a part of the consent agreement?
Yes, sir, it would.
All right, so that,
and we won't do it
he
on
would
all
have
these.
to have that. He couldn't refuse to pay.
Right.
Yeah.
And we don't do that on all cases, just some that we feel we need it.
Is there more questions? All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
This'll help. It'll give a department a lot more leverage on folks that ain't doing what they're supposed to be doing.
I'm glad that Representative Dickey asked that question. Nobody on the Senate side thought of that.
That's why the House is so important.
That's the reason I was trained on the House side. Mr. Chairman, on Senate Bill 390, the other bill that I have before you this morning, and you have a substitute to that bill that we're going to
40-0173S. Right.
Yes, sir. Georgia Crop Improvement Association, under law, they're the designated association that oversees the the certifications of all plants and seeds that we grow in this state for the Georgia Seed Development Association, or Commission, Georgia Seed Development Commission. And because of the way that the current law is, that they aren't considered a part of state government, and so they just wanted to become a part of state government from the standpoint that they would be exempt from liabilities, just like any other state agency is. This doesn't exempt them from any responsibilities if they're negligent or in any form or fashion, but they go out to growers that grow foundation seed or registered seed and see to it that everything is done according to standards that are set forth. Actually, these are federal standards, and they're a 501c3 corporation in the state of Georgia. But all this does is puts them into the same standing that any other state agency is, and they are quasi-state agency because they're appointed by the College of Agriculture for that responsibility. And I'm going to actually, if you would, Mr. Chairman, allow me to, I'd like to refer to the other section, Section 2 of this chapter, that deals with seed arbitration, over to Representative Roberts. He requested this part to be put into this piece of legislation because it's under the same code section area.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under Section 2, it deals with the Seed Arbitration Board. And I don't know how many of you have actually had to deal with the Seed Arbitration Board. If you're a farmer, you may have had to deal with them before. I've actually this past year had some issues with seed, but I had several farmers that had issues with seed as well as in several years in the past. The problem with the way that the current language is written, it says within 10 days after the alleged defect or violation becomes apparent to allow inspection of alleged deficiencies if deemed necessary. The problem with that is the attorneys have been using that 10-day window to kick out a lot of these seed arbitrations. They've been saying, well, you didn't file it within 10 days. And in all honesty, it's hard to ever file it within 10 days. I mean, we talk about seed will germinate within 2 to 3 days, but, you know, Livermore, you've grown cotton. Ellis, several of us have. I've dusted cotton seed in. Just sit there for 30 days before it ever come up, before we ever got the rain. And the problem is, as long as you keep having that 10 days, it gives the attorneys an opportunity. I contacted the department last year, talked to them a little bit then, and we have since then had some meetings and some discussions. We've come up with the language that you see in here on line 37 that says, in time for the seed or plants to be inspected to determine if the alleged deficiencies warrant arbitration. What that does is it gives an opportunity for the producer, the farmer, to go out and look at it and not be confined to that 10 days. We're just removing that 10 days or that defined period of time so that it's not going to be something that's caught up. I mean, the farmer, at the end of the day, when he believes that there's a problem, I can promise you he's going to be contacting the dealer. He's then going to be contacting who the seed company is. And this language actually come from South Carolina. I talked with the commissioner about it, and looking at a 30-day or whatever, we decided that this was the language that was probably best, and so therefore that's the language that you see before you here in Section 2, and I'll be glad to answer any questions anybody might have about it.
Anybody have any questions for either the Senate Ag Chairman or the House Transportation Chairman? We do have one testimony. Brian, whatever you want to get, sir, be fine. Yeah, be fine. Yeah, that's good.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, committee. It's always good to be with this group. It's generally better to be out there in the grandstands instead of up here talking about a bill, especially talking about concerns of a bill that was an amendment that was brought forward by certainly a friend of agriculture, a friend of the Georgia General Assembly, and not be on the same page. We wish we weren't in this position. What we have is certainly the legislation that was brought by Senator Bullock that passed the Senate dealing with the Crop Improvement Association is valid and supported, and we like it very much. We've heard those stories, and that legislation seeks to remedy it. The committee sub that has the amendment that Representative Roberts just went through also has a lot of merit. There is disagreement as to what that language should be within the industry. And I appreciate Representative Roberts reaching out. He and I have spoken briefly about this issue. He's talked with some of the seed companies. One I know in particular, I suppose he has reached out to others. And with the Commissioner of Agriculture, who we all have a great deal of respect for, he and his staff. The legislation, SB 390, deals with liability and looks to limit the liability of the Crop Improvement Association. Well, Section 2 takes a limited liability portion of Georgia law and opens it up to expand liability. And the language that's used, that's before you in this bill, in our opinion, and in the conversation in the letter that I've passed on to you, which I'll reference in just a minute, leaves the liability door wide open. And what we seek to do is to work with this committee, certainly work with Representative Roberts and the Department of Agriculture and all the various seed companies and seed professionals, and come up with language that accomplishes exactly what Representative Roberts wants to accomplish, but does it in a way that also protects the farmer, but also protects the seed companies. And I know we can do that. We have agreement that the 10 days is not adequate. Should it be 14 days? Should it be 30 days? Should it be 90 days? That's what I would like to work on with y'all's assistance. Work on that issue, bring it forward next year, and I think we can find language that we can come to this committee we can all fully support. In referencing real quickly the letter from that I passed around to you, the highlighted section by Jimmy Clements. If you're in agriculture and you're in seed, then you know Jimmy Clements. And you also see that he served on the Seed Arbitration Board for about a dozen years, it appears. This is a man that knows the seed industry, and he has the interests of the farmers as well as the seed companies. His type of input is what we need in this process. And so that's what we're asking for. We want to resolve this issue. We want to come forward with language that is solid, and we ask for the opportunity to do that in the next legislative session. Instead of it, unless there's, I just don't believe, Mr. Chairman, that there's a time frame that would allow us to come up with language for this legislative session, because there's so many different companies and so many different interests that need to be brought together. We can do that over a period of several weeks during the summer and come forward and I think have a resolution that everyone can be agreeable to, certainly including the author of the proposed amendment, Representative Roberts. And with that, I'll take any questions, and I appreciate your time.
Anybody have any questions? Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I have one thing that concerned me. It says, the current law says, within 10 days after the alleged defect or violation becomes apparent. Now, that doesn't say within 10 days after you plant it. It says within 10 days after the violation becomes apparent. So how are the lawyers limiting it to 10 days, period? That's...
Representative Harden, what they're saying is, and what they're using with that is, how do you determine what that 10 days is? When is that alleged problem there? In other words, was it when you had a partial stand come up? Was it when you had nothing come up? Or was it, 2 weeks later after you dusted it in? And the problem with the 10 days is it puts that within law, that 10 days in there, and has a defined time, and that's what they're using to kick out a lot of these claims.
All right, so they're trying to define what the alleged defect of violation apparent is. Yeah.
That's our mind.
All right. Is that what it is? Okay. All right.
Thank you. Let me, for the benefit of those that might not be as familiar with some of these challenges with cotton stands in particular, address the issue that is before us. Quite often, people plant cotton, and as Jay mentioned, dusting it in. They plant it knowing there's not enough moisture there to get it germinate, but to go ahead and get the seed out there so when it rains, it'll all come on up. The challenge is doing that. If you just happen to hit a little bit of moisture, there'll be enough to swell that seed, make it come up, so you'll have some come up. Or if you get just a little sprinkle, you can get a partial germination of some of them, depending on the depth that the particular was planted. And quite often you will see crops that will be grown and be successful where they've actually got two different crops out there. You've got the seed that came up with that first little sprinkle, and then there was another, maybe a week, 2 weeks before there was another good rain, and the rest of it come up. And so you've got a situation where that would call for some real serious judgment, because if there's enough moisture to make that seed swell and go sprouting, and then not enough for it to go ahead and finish, then in other words, it's not going to come. But you could judge then that, you know, yes, it did germinate and start, but if it didn't swell and it didn't, you could go back at some point in time and say this seed didn't germinate like it should. So a judgment could be made at a date whenever there was been enough rain to get the soil wet, so that all of it that was going to germinate would go ahead and germinate. So you know, the 10-day thing is a problem with cotton in the way we grow it right now. And as I see the issue laid out here before us, you know, we've got good folks here that are coming with some concerns and want to address this language. Now, the question that is in my mind was this needs to be addressed right here. We need to get the 10 days out. Now, you want to, let's go ahead and let's get the 10 days out and then come back next year with some better language and put it in play at that time. That would be sort of more to my thinking. So I'll lay this out for the rest of you to think over.
Representative Black, I've actually reached out. I have talked with seed company. I actually talked with Monsanto, probably who is the biggest seed company that's out there. This is the language that they actually agreed to as well. So, you know, when you're looking at seed companies, if you've got a company like Monsanto that's saying that we're okay with this language, then I'm concerned why other seed companies are saying we've got a problem with it. I will say that the way I read the language and the way we discussed it, and even over at the department discussing it with the commissioner, I think this language actually helps protect seed companies more than anything, because it requires, when it says, in a time for the seed crop or plants to be inspected. In other words, you can't go out there and destroy that crop without giving them an opportunity to come out and look at it ahead of time. If you do, then you ain't going to file arbitration. Under this language, you are required to do that. So it gives them the opportunity to come out and say, which Seed Arbitration Board doesn't cover vigor to start off with. This is a vigor issue. And for those of you who don't understand, the vigor is how quick that seed will come up out of the ground. In other words, how potent it is, as I guess in layman's terms. But they don't cover vigor to start off with. We actually looked at addressing vigor within the seed arbitration. However, in looking at other states, no other state addresses vigor. We actually looked at language from Texas, we looked at language from South Carolina, from North Carolina, and from Mississippi and the surrounding states. And this was the language that we finally come upon and agreed to.
Well, I agree with the vigor is one of these states. I don't think they even got a good test at all of the supposedly
Some,
experts agree on.
some companies actually do test vigor, others do not.
Yeah, but even the tests they use, there's dispute as
That's
to whether or not
correct.
they're valid and
That's correct.
applicable. But I agree with you. This 10 days needs to come out. And I'm willing, let's go ahead and put it out right now. But in respect to Brian and everything, if they want to come back next year with some additional language, we'll address it
They
next
can
year.
come back next year if they
Right.
want to with language, and
But
we'll look at it and
but
see.
This 10 days needs to come out, folks. So,
Anybody else have any questions for either John, Jay, or Brian? Excuse me. If you look on down on line 45, it also talks about trees and fruit trees and
Sometimes it takes 3 years for a fruit tree before you know you've got a problem. You're not watching it close like you do a crop.
I also had a letter or an email or something from Steve McWilliams, who's Georgia Forester Association. He's at the dentist. But they are in favor of this language. It's, I guess, part about the tree stuff. And you know, we're talking about seed, but I just want y'all to be aware that it also does include trees, Doc.
We've heard some great comments. I'd like to hear the author, Senator Bullock, make his request now, what he would rather do.
Okay. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Dr. Maddox, you could have gone all day without doing that.
he wants to cut you.
I want to do whatever the pleasure of this committee wants to do. It's an issue out there, and I'm a cotton farmer, and as Representative Black and Representative Roberts has said, I think it more has had concerns in the cotton seed, and last year, probably more so than in several years, and in the same field, under the same circumstances of soil moistures, farmers had experiences last year with one variety coming up and another variety not coming up. And is that an issue of germination, or is that an issue of vigor? It may be that this plant had better vigor, and you normally don't plant cotton but about one joint of the finger deep if you've got adequate moisture. If you don't have adequate moisture, you don't put it 2 joints deep. You put it just under the top of the soil because you don't want it to germinate. And as Representative said a while ago about dusting it in and getting just a little bit of moisture, if you get just a little bit of moisture in that top 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch where that seed lays, is enough moisture to germinate it, but there's no moisture, it's dry dirt below it, and when that peg starts going down and it gets in that dry dirt and it dies. But now that's not the seed's fault. So it's a germination issue based on moisture. So all of these things come into being, and when you've got that window designated there, that 10 days, I had cotton last year that the seed laid there for over 3 weeks before I got enough moisture. I had 70% came up, but we just had an issue with moisture, and when we had gone in and tilled the field, in some areas you lost that moisture more so than you did others, and then when you planted it and your seed was all the same depth, but it just didn't germinate. So I don't have a problem with what the substitute does. It's not part of what my original bill was, but I don't have a problem with it. If this committee wants to move it forward with that in it, I'm perfectly all right with it.
Mr. Chairman, I move with Jack pass his substitute bill.
Second.
All right, got a motion and a second. I was going to explain some stuff that John and me talked about the other day, but I won't. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. All right, y'all, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, on both of these bills, I'll leave it up to you.
Okay.
The department bill is one of them, and I think you had said, told them maybe you'd carry that.
Yeah,
I don't know.
we'll figure out.
Right. And Chairman Roberts probably needs to carry that other one since he's.
This may or may not be the last meeting of this committee this year. I don't know yet. But in a kind of a safety effort issue, we got the newest guy in the House and the newest guy on this committee, but we also have two that have chosen to let their years of service, this be the last one. And if this is, in fact, the last meeting of this committee, I would like for Lynn Moore and Doc to say something, whichever. And we appreciate, Lynn Moore been on this committee ever since I've been here. And what, you've been here 20 years, Lynn Moore? So, y'all, we owe them a gratitude.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been a good ride for these 20 years. There's been some ups and there's been some downs. But let me just say, as a freshman, I challenged the chairman on the very first day I was in the committee, Mr. Henry Reeves. In an interview that know Mr. Henry didn't really play. But I challenged him on a local farmers market bill, and I voted against it. And we defeated that bill. A few days later, I got a letter from my veterinarian that they needed $3.7 million to do some work on the diagnostic center in Tifton. And now I'm nervous. I got to go back to Mr. Henry. So I went back to a seat near the line for Mr. Henry. Mr. Chairman, I said, I need to talk to you. He said, what do you want to talk about? I said, I got a letter from my veterinarian. Here's the letter. They need $7.3 million to improve the diagnostic center in Tifton. He said, hell, Lynn Moore, I've been trying to get that money in the budget for the last 2 or 3 years. If you can get me enough votes, we'll get it done. That taught me a lesson. Mr. Henry was a real chairman, although I voted against him. But since that time, we've had a lot of challenges, but we've had a lot of good chairmen. And as Tom always say, the person that really keeps this committee together is the secretary. Pat, you're one of them, and before you, Miss Jean, you all are beautiful people. You all took care of all of our needs, and I appreciate you as much as I do Tom. And let me just say about the chairman. Mr. Henry was a strong man. I admired him. He fought anybody that disagreed with him. He didn't play. And he took me as his little pet after that fight. And he tell my wife certain stories when we go off. But that was all right, too. And when Mr. Henry decided to retire, me being a farmer, I went to Robert Ray and asked him if he would accept it if I could get enough support from the speaker and the leadership to make him chairman. He said, of course he would. So I did that. And Robert made me vice chairman. And we had a good time. Robert let me have my way, so I got a little bit spoiled there. And then came along Tom McCall, whom I had worked with. Quiet, kind of laid back. But Tom ended up being a better chairman than I thought you'd be, Tom. You ended up being a good chairman. I wasn't going to mention that, but that's all right. I'm going to forgive you, and I'm going to tell one for do what you said. You owe him a favor, and whatever that favor is, you give it to him. But let me say, in leaving this committee, I'll always remember you. And remember that agriculture is the backbone of this state. Hold steadfast. Pass good bills, defeat bad bills. And we will always remember you for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn Moore. Mr. Chairman, I want to say this. When I was elected 8 years ago, and the speaker asked me what committee I'd like to be on, the one committee I wanted to be on was agriculture. You know, I feel like that if you're on a committee, you ought to have some knowledge of what's going on. I grew up on a farm down here in Butts County and was a large animal veterinarian and treated large animal all my life, and I feel like that the ones that are here has got the same priorities and the same interests that I've got. Down here, you meet a new group of people. I did, and I have learned to respect each and every one of them, but there's not a group down here that I have more respect for than I do the Agriculture Committee. Pat has been great to me, and Chairman McCall has just been wonderful. So I'm going to miss it. I don't know what I'm going to do. People keep asking me. I'm going to go back down there, and 2 years from now, I may decide I want to run again. I'm getting a little age on me, but I hope I'm in as good a shape as I feel, and if I am, I'll be around a few more years. My mother lived to be 95, so that's nearly 20 more years. But anyway, it's been great, and I thoroughly want you all to know that it has been a great opportunity to serve on the Ag Committee. Thank you.
Anybody else want to say anything to these two?
Especially to Lynn Moore, who when I was a freshman, he come up and I was on the Ag Committee, and I was like Gene. That was the one I requested to be on, and actually the only one that I got that I requested, but I was glad that I got that committee. And I want to thank Lynn Moore for his friendship during that time. He and the chairman at the time, Robert Ray, treated me with respect, and I always remember that. And I appreciate your friendship and what you've meant to me over the years. Lynn Moore, you have truly been an example by which the rest of us should follow, and I thank you. And Gene, buddy, what can I say? You know, it's been a good ride. You know, I can remember when you was first elected and you come up here. You've done an outstanding job representing your area as well in the veterinarian industry, and both of you are true statesmen for the state of Georgia, and I appreciate y'all. Thank you.
Yeah, and Lynn Moore, that's that goes for me too. You and I share a county, and I've enjoyed that because you've taught me a lot when I came into the freshman, and I appreciate all of that. Gene, you too have been a kind of an inspiration. I remember you really represent your people, because you used to come to other meetings that I was involved in other than agriculture, and I appreciate your support, and appreciate both y'all more than you'll ever know.
Well, there's two things. Everybody in this building that's elected hope we are smart enough to do like they do and quit before we get quit. And I don't know if that was y'all's brainchild or the other thing the other people we need to thank is Miss Fay and Miss Patsy for letting y'all come up here and getting y'all where you're supposed to be on time.
That's right.
And they may have a heap to do with y'all being smart enough to quit before you got beat. But tell them how much this committee appreciates everything they do and did for us, and for sharing y'all with us. So we appreciate y'all for everything, and appreciate all you did for this committee and what you're going to continue to do for the biggest, most important industry in this state. So thank y'all very much for your service.
I'd like to ask you one question.
Okay.
Maybe a year from now, 2 years from now, if I'm in Atlanta, can I come by and sit out there?
No, you can come by and sit up here if I got anything to do with it.
Be in your committee and listen.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Thank y'all very much for coming.
Okay, Lynn Moore. Yes, sir. Have a good one. Yeah.